Don't make, stop. Oh, why no scope? Whoa. Dude, I'm like an adventure character right now, dude. I look stacked. I'm ready to tear up the world of the infected. Gentlemen and the 5 ladies that watch this, one of which being my mom. Hi, Mom. I recently went and watched the movie 28 Years Later. That dude, Alex Garland, been taking a lot of my money with his involved projects as of late. Warfare, Civil War. I think he was on Ex Machina. That's not as new. Now, of course, he got his band back together to do 28 Years Later. The TLDR, a lot of bows. I liked it. The goal of this video is to go over a brief synopsis of the movie, go through the plot line, and then also add to the plot line things that I think they should have done to improve their chances of survival with their whole setup. There's gonna be some spoilers, so this is a spoiler warning. God, dude, it's like 9,000 degrees in here, Colton. Keep this place like a sauna. Where's my half-calf soy latte, Colton? I'm wearing a jacket in here and it's summer in Arizona. In the movie, we pick up in the year 2030, taking place on the island of the UK, or Great Britannia, as I like to say. Rule Britannia! Britannia! Doesn't rule the waves anymore. Everyone's pretty much dead, or infected, or hanging on to survival by a thread. 28 years after the outbreak of the rage virus, which happened in 2002, if you can't do math. Now, the zombies in 28 Years Later are a terrifying threat. We know what's even scarier are data brokers selling your information. That's why we have to thank the sponsor of this video, Aura. We're Aura farming. Have you ever Googled your name, your information, been a little bit alarmed by what you find? This is where Aura comes into play. There are companies known as data brokers. Those data brokers are out there farming your information where they turn around and sell it. They do it without your consent and they can make billions selling it to other corporations, and even stalkers can get a hold of this information. Alarming. Now, these data brokers are legally obligated to remove your information if you ask, but they purposely make this a very bureaucratic and time-consuming ordeal. Yet again, that's where Aura comes into play. Aura comes in and says, "Hey, data brokers, knock it off!" And they remove your information as part of their service. As a businessman doing business, one thing you quickly learn that it's easier and smarter to hire the person for a job that's far more efficient for that task. It's like you're bringing on Aura as a security detail for your information. In security, cybersecurity. Aura is an all-in-one digital security. You may already have digital security tool, but not having Aura is like locking the front door, but leaving the back door open. Get alerts if your personal info is found on the dark web. Real-time fraud alerts for credit and banking. 24/7 monitoring to help keep your identity secure. A secure VPN, antivirus, password manager, and more. US-based support available around the clock if something goes wrong. If anything does happen, Aura includes $5 million in identity theft insurance protection, and they have US fraud experts ready to help 24/7. One app, every layer of protection. If you're like me and you hate the idea of companies making money off of your information, then you can sign up for Aura today. If you go to aura.com/bureaufiles, you can start your 14-day trial for free. I won't leave myself vulnerable, and neither should you. Thanks again to Aura for sponsoring this video. Fun fact, I was rewatching some of 28 Weeks Later, and I realized that movie was filmed in 2007. Now, if it takes place just 28 weeks after the outbreak of the rage virus in 2002, I don't think they would have had the ACU pattern that the military guys have in the movie. I think that is timeline incorrect. Also, are we also like fighting the Iraqis in Afghanistan while fighting a zombie virus? Dude, that's crazy. That's insane. Military guys getting to go and they're like, I'm getting deployed to Britain? I gotta shoot zombies? What? In the description of 28 Years Later, there is a covering that mainland Europe and France has been cleared of the infected, leaving just the island of the UK. The modern powers that be have since set up a blockade around the island, making it a quarantine zone. Nobody in, nobody out. The movie picks up on the Holy Island of Lindisfarne. Jamie's son Spike is having his coming of age ritual, where Jamie, the dad, is going to take his son Spike on a little bit of a hunting trip or a little bit of a scouting trip beyond the security of their village. The interesting thing about this whole island is that it has a single entrance in and out and is protected by the tides. So it is actually a very good defensible structure. Now, before we get to this next part, which has to do with focusing on the defenses and plans for what I think would improve their whole village setup, I want to talk about a big why behind this video even existing. One, this channel is pretty nerdy. Two, loads of money. Two, a big trend and trope with zombie movies is that I find there is a big stagnation for rebuilding civilization. To whatever degree of zombie you're dealing with, it feels like humanity can just never get back on track and fully get things going. Now, despite like nuclear reactors blowing up because no one's manning them or whatever, I feel like it should be relatively easy getting back to normal. Like for instance, The Walking Dead. Guys, The Walking Dead is a pile of hot garbage. I appreciate it for what it was when it came out. It's more so the concept I'm talking about, where you have these slow walking zombies in Georgia, in America. Like if that zombie outbreak happened right now, you would still have to go to work. Your boss wouldn't even let you bring a gun. They'd be like, bring it back. Oh, there's a zombie out back? Oh yeah, just bring it, like go kill it. It's not a scary zombie movie. Like we could bounce back from that pretty damn quick. Even the zombies in 28 years later, yeah, they're fast. Yeah, they're like kind of scary because they're fast. But the whole rules about this are actually not that bad. The only real scary thing about it is that the blood itself is super contagious if it gets inside of your orifices. But I mean, you can pretty much like body shot those things in the head or the heart if you have conventional weapons. You can take it down pretty easy. And what you'll see in the movie is just a bunch of naked people chasing you down, so they're not that scary of a target. There's more to it, but I'm trying to lay some more ground foundation. Now, like scarier zombies like Dawn of the Dead, where they're all fast zombies, or the World War Z zombies are all crazy fast and you have to hit them in the head to kill them, that's terrifying. If you have to make a super small headshot and they're already crazy fast and it's a fast contagion, that's when things get very concerning, because that's a whole nother level of marksmanship you have to pull off. But if it's like a zombie that all you have to do is body shot it, that's like easy money all day. Body shot. Phrasing. So that's typically a big gripe I have with the zombie film genre. Still want to explore the movie and see how we can ourselves rebuild civilization. It's over. Western civilization is so over. The rage virus is here. The S has H'd the F. You already know the drill on Bureau Files. We're getting whiteboard up in here. All right, here's a rough map of what we got so far. Island, mainland, land bridge controlled by the tidal waves as our defenses. Now, once you get to the island itself, there is a small little defensive gate at the very front. But from what I was looking at, as far as the defensive structure goes, kind of hot garbage. There's like wooden posts, and then they had like concertina wire, just barbed wire, and some other kind of wooden structure. This doesn't look as solid as it could be. I mean, it goes back to, I've said this before in other videos, like with Last of Us video, it's like you had 20 plus years to prepare defenses. It's kind of no excuse to go about making a better structure. Like they have a watchtower that overlooks the gate. We have one gate. What we should really focus on is a incremental expansion out of your town. One thing to think about is the amount of resources and logistics that's going to go into this. It's going to take a lot of time, and you have to worry and focus about tidal waves of moving supplies to and from the mainland back to your village. Now, there's a few ways you can go about it, but in my head, what I think you should do is secure your entrance to your island, and that way at least you have that first layer of security down. I also think at the same time, you could be doing, in theory, multiple things, but with the manpower that you have access to, and I'm not really sure how many are on the island off the top of my head, but with the manpower that you have access to, I would also, as fast as possible, secure a fortress on the other side of that land bridge. I know you're probably thinking like, wow, can't believe you thought of that. There's more to it. So you want to, as quickly as possible, secure that other entrance for a few reasons. One big reason would be the allowance of staging materials and supplies. And you also have a foothold on the mainland. And this will give you more reach as you go out, because now if you had people, say, being chased by infected, you don't just have to worry about them trying to now be cut off from the island. Now you have a potential safe haven that they can run into. But that's your fortress. You also have a spot where you can stage supplies for either coming in or going out. And now you don't have to worry about the tidal waves, or if you wanted to bring your supplies back in, you can just stage them right there. In theory, you could have done this already on the coastline, but those supplies could be vulnerable to bandits, marauders, and the infected messing with your workers. This allows a layer of security, which is really important because we want to have incremental approaches out. Now, generally, I would say that this fortress would have some kind of setup. You would have like a wall of some kind going out into the ocean just to really help out. And then you'd have like an interior wall that's connecting to inside of the fortress too. So it's like just in case some sort of infected, which they don't seem to like the water, managed to get around the edge of that wall, because you want it to be pretty much hugging that coastline, and you can have that extra layer of security, which I think would be really important. You also have the option now for like starting to build docks out there too, where now you don't have to rely on just a land bridge, you can now rely on a boat. Now, one thing to maybe be concerned about is maybe if your boat gets caught in the current and you get sent out to the quarantine area, like a Navy out there would just schwack you for getting too close to exiting out too far, which would be alarming, but they'll come into play later. As we build up our defenses, which would be a whole plethora of stuff you can do, I generally think there should be, like, at a minimum, a gatehouse of some kind for all these hard points, where you have a dedicated murder holes that can look down onto the gate in case there are breaches. Now, while all of this is going on, everyone's house that they live in would start to look like a miniature fortress itself. One thing you see at the very opening of the movie with Jimmy, his dad being a vicar, and then his parents are like, stay here, and then the infected all come in, he goes, sees his dad. Anyway, what you notice about like a lot of these scenes in 28 days, weeks, years later, is like they get into the house and there's no other obstructions in the house besides like regular common doors. It's not like fatal funnels, there's not like barring of access, entry and exit points, and in theory, with the type of threat you're dealing with, you're just dealing with like a crazed animal that's a person. You're not dealing with a sophisticated threat of like you're being besieged by an enemy and they're gonna like burn you out. Really, you can wait them out, and you can do probably creative things like create murder holes within your house too to like help kill these things. So while all that's going on of like external defenses being built up, I think internally people should have like their own little fortresses in case there ever was a breach, so you don't always get sent back to zero on the survivability scale. When we look at the society that we're shown in the movie, what we really see is like a medieval society that has the knowledge of modern times. It's kind of what it feels like. So now if we get back to the fortress on the outside, right? Over time, you can always beef this thing up more. I think it would be cool to not only do trenches, but have like using the ocean, create a moat that goes around it. Moats are pretty sick. I feel like when you look at a castle that has a moat, you're like, damn, dude, that's kind of dope. So now we have like an actual fortress where you can get a good foothold. I think there's an actual castle on the Holy Island, but it really wasn't in play in the movie, so we're just going off of what I have. Another thing I was thinking about of logistical gathering of supplies, even down to like wood or whatever else you can get your hands on. It looks like their society mainly just like fuels off of wood, which you can't fault it. I'm sure there's not that much other stuff around. So that being said, I think once you build your first base, you would then want to build like temporary fortresses wherever you go around your supplies and gathering. I can't believe this channel has as many subs as it does with my terrible drawings. I appreciate you guys. Really, I think the defenses could be very simple. You're just constantly building up and progressing and securing more space for your society to expand. I even think that maybe decades down the road, after successful growth, living on the island could be where like all the rich villagers live now versus like you're stuck on the mainland and it's a little bit riskier and all the prime real estate's on the island. That could be like some fun dynamics that your society could eventually develop, and I think that'd be really interesting because this whole thing is a very interesting thought process of what would happen with modern society if it got nuked back to, say, like the medieval era, right? No power, no electricity. If you do have electricity, it's probably going to be very scarce of a source. The modern world and comforts that you knew are now gone, and you're trying to rebuild society. I think we as humans have always been fascinated with the dark interest of that side of chaos. Of the many aspects of the movie, there was one detail that I found very appealing myself, even, and that would be the tight-knit community that island had. You clearly see it very quickly off the rip in the movie when you're introduced to that village, but you can tell that it's a type of village everyone knows, everyone has a specific job, everyone is valued, and I think that kind of resonates with a lot of dudes. I can't speak to the female experience.
We're communists.
But for the males, young guys, there's always a feeling of like not being needed or wanted by society, because our society has become so evolved and progressed that we have very little discomforts, and there's very few places where younger men can go out and prove their mettle. In this society in the movie, there's a clear like coming of age ritual. It's expected that we can see. It's like your dad's gonna take you out into the wilderness and show you what's what, and eventually maybe you'll learn how to hunt, and that's like your thing and you'll be good at at it, and chances are if you're a hunter, you're probably one of the cooler guys in the village because everyone kind of puts a value on danger and also being able to provide delicious raw meat. So in a weird way, that, even though it's like a catastrophe, has its own appeal because, those guys aren't paying taxes too, which is also kind of sick. I truly think it's one of those things where those people all rely on each other very much, and they're tight-knit and they have something special in that community. Modern society, it's like none of those things we really find value. Everything they do for survival, we all look at as hobbies now because life is so comfortable. So Jamie and his son Spike are on their little escapade going around the countryside. And I can imagine being Spike, being a 12-year-old boy, and your dad, who you look up to, being this potential badass. We don't really know just how cool he is yet, but like going out there into the wild where things can actually kill you now has got to be a very nerve-wracking feeling. It's like you can kind of say the same in modern society. Like you could take your sons out into the wilderness, and sure, there's bears and there's mountain lions. It doesn't necessarily feel as scary as it would if there were zombies out there that can infect you and then rip your head off too, as we'll find out. Our coming of age in America, it's like, yeah, you could go out to the wilderness, but everyone has guns. Like no one's truly that scared of a bear if you have a gun. I mean, it's still scary. Like don't get me wrong, I don't get charged by a grizzly bear because of all that mass coming at me. But also, if you have a firearm, it's not that bad. If you're just going out into the wilderness like that with bows, that's pretty terrifying. Like if I had to worry about a mountain lion or a grizzly bear and all I had was a bow, that's pretty gnarly. I would pee my pants and cry. Spike and Jamie would come across some infected, but these wouldn't be the infected that we typically know from the 28 weeks, days genre of zombies. These are actually fat and slow zombies. What we can kind of tell is that these things either have like bad eyesight or rely on sound to search for food. Like they're just digging up worms and eating them, because with the rage virus, it doesn't make you like dead, it just makes you crazy. Like I think it's like a form of rabies or something like that. And with all of the infected, they have to find a food source. Like backing up to 28 weeks later, it said that all the zombies starved out. Back to now, the outbreak, it's like these zombies are out in the wild, they're still kicking. What's their food source? We'll find out. So Jamie and Spike dispatch those slow zombies. How do they dispatch the zombies? You probably guessed and you probably know. Bows and arrows. Fellas, if there's anything I love in life, it's a good use of archery in film. I love getting some bow time myself. I have a little setup in my yard that I'll go out, work on my tan, listen to an audiobook, and sling some arrows. We're gonna nerd out. So not only are we on the island of England, where a very strong culture of medieval archery was prevalent, but now it's like a form of survival, which I find fascinating. In the movie itself, there are like callbacks to medieval archery, where you have figurines of medieval longbowmen or warbowmen. As soon as I really saw how much bows were being mentioned in the movie, I was like, all right, yeah, I'm making a video on this. Even in the village itself, they show footage of people doing the tradecraft around archery. Say, bowyers making bows or fletchers making arrows, which I all find very interesting. I myself have made arrows before, and it's actually not too hard. I don't have the skills to make a bow yet. I'm working up to it. Now in the movie, they use a flat bow. This bow right here is what I would consider a flat bow. They don't use what I would call a long bow in the movie. This would be just made out of a single piece of wood and it's flat, go figure. I actually think it's a pretty solid choice of a tool as far as archery goes for their circumstances. And then being in England, part of me kind of wishes they used longbows more, but also for what they're doing and the threat, a longbow I would say is not that ideal, right? Not only is it really long, but if you're trying to go for more power, it's just not necessary given the threat. This is actually not just a longbow, it's a medieval warbow. You may think in theory, okay, you had 28 years, potentially some of these kids growing up, they could master the English warbow at those insane draw weights, getting easily over 100 pounds, maybe even get up to 160. But to that I say, why? If your threat's a bunch of unarmed crazy people, why would you need all that power to take them out? I think it's just not practical. Now, if you could shoot a 135-pound warbow like you could shoot a 55-pound bow, then I would be like, I guess, yeah, why not? For instance, why I bring that up is because this one's actually 135 pounds. I'm pretty big into bows, fellas. I'm trying to train my way up to this one. I can't even get it yet. Oh my God. Oh God. It's a Haas Mama, boys. Here's just a cheap recurve that I like to shoot a bunch. It's only 55 pounds. Like this, to me, would be perfect for taking on zombies in their context. I could shoot this thing all day. Be no problem, dude. It's the ideal bow for CQB combat against zombies. That's one thing I hate about movies, Colton. Like, I was watching Prey, and like the Indians in that movie were running around with like their bow at half cock, like scanning. Honestly, it's just as fast to like not do that and easier. It's like trying to have tension on your arm when you're trying to run around, you know? It's like just stop, plant, and then, dude, it's so autistic. I can't believe you guys like this channel. It's like peak autismo action. Now we get introduced to what like the real threat of the landscape is, and that would be the fast zombies. And not only fast zombies, but even new to the genre, alpha male zombies. If there's anything I want to aspire to be in life, it's an alpha male zombie. Let me just introduce you to the idea of the 28 years later alpha zombie. Imagine you're already a jacked dude. You get infected. You're gonna get more jacked, because apparently the rage virus acts like a form of steroid in some, turning them into freaks of nature. These alpha zombies are all tall, and they just so happen to also have an absolute hammer swinging around down south. It was actually alarming in the movie to see a giant Johnson constantly chasing you down attached to a huge man. I think if anything, that was one of the more terrifying aspects of the movie. Samson's genitalia is some low-hanging fruit as far as comedic material goes, both figuratively and literally. So I'm gonna blow right past that. Fellas, if I get infected, I lift weights, I'm already kind of strong. Don't kill me. I want to see if I can turn into an alpha zombie. Life doesn't look so bad for the alpha zombies. This leads to another whole question about the society with the whole archery thing. I like that they are using archery. I think it's a good idea. With the zombie being very contagious in the contamination process, blood getting on you, blood spatter, it makes using other weapons kind of risky. Say you're in tight quarters, one of those rage virus zombies pops out of you, you blast that thing with a shotgun. What's that blood spray gonna do? I mean, hopefully it's gonna go one direction, but who knows about where else it's gonna splatter. There's always that risk. That being said, I'd still rather have a shotgun than a bow, but you get the idea. It's less very risky with these kind of zombies. One thing I was pontificating on was the use of, say, more men-at-arms style of combative roles. Yeah, the bow is great, but not everyone I think should be a bowman. I think you should have options of melee style combat, because I think you should be able to combine the two. I think when you go out like that, say for hunting parties or just for scouting stuff or for whatever, having the option of that melee style of combat on you seems pretty no-brainer. I mean, of course, it's always gonna be scary when you come across an alpha zombie, but if you have friends working its flanks with arrows, then I think it's not as bad while you try and poke it with a big-ass axe, spear, sword, whatever you got, whatever you want to use, whatever your flavor is. I think making some kind of armor, whether it's all the way from high-end plate armor to leather armor, is a no-brainer. Anything where it's going to stop that virus from getting in contact with you. Of course, the big problem is, what do you do for like face protection besides an obvious helmet? I mean, you can see in the movie that these zombies like projectile vomit when people start getting infected, so there's always that risk of blood, bile, biomatter coming into those opening holes of helmets, so you're going to have some sort of contamination. Would probably be uncomfortable, but it's better than being infected. It's like if you had armor and you had friends that also had armor, it's like, okay, you guys get online, oh, there's 5 coming, say there's only 3 of us, it's like, all right, just slightly spread out for the swings. Ha! You know, you just take them out one after the other. Kabonk! I guess even easier if you have a fatal funnel too. Here's where I thought things could be even more interesting, and we didn't really see much use of it at all, but that would be the use of horses. Now you may think, well, of course horses take feed, and it's like, well, yeah, I mean, you're in England, I'm sure it's a pretty lush countryside, and there's plenty of resources that you can do. We've been doing this for thousands of years, figure it out, guys. I'm not gonna get into the weeds of like every technology tree it takes. I'm just gonna tell you what I want and expect. Horses. We saw the use of bicycles on the island. They obviously had other farm style animals like pigs and whatnot, but we didn't really see any horses, and I thought horses could be very useful. Now you may think, well, gee, buddy, you're dealing with zombies. Wouldn't a horse just bite the zombie? And I believe in 28 weeks later, they said that there was no cross-contamination from species. So if your horse gets bit, not at the end of the world. Now you could worry about the horse being taken out by zombies. Also, unlike other undead entities we've seen from previous videos, whether it be Game of Thrones, which mainly is what I'm thinking about, and I would say The Last of Us zombies, like those kind of like undead threats, horseback, maybe not the best idea, because those things are scarier and they're either up armored or way bigger of a threat, it feels like. But with these kind of zombies just being regular humans, I feel like a war horse of some kind, like a horse broken and specifically bred for running over people, is like ideal. Back in my cop days, Colton, during the riots, I was working the streets, dude. The mounted police came by on their horses. Dude, those horses were massive. So I was like, dang, I didn't realize like that they were that staunch. Like I've seen horses, of course, before, like ridden horses before, but it's like these things were just beefcakes. of ponies. Cavalry has been a thing for thousands of years, and a big problem with that style of warfare is how do you implement your horses and its formations against organized men that are well-led, well-disciplined, and have the right tools to counteract your cavalry charge? Well, you don't really have to worry about that with these undead zombies. You mainly just want to not get caught too close by a bunch of them, and if you have open space to move and maneuver your horse, you can pretty much pick these things off at your leisure. Like if you're mounted on a horse, up armored, and you had a cavalry saber, you could ride around and just hack these things to death like it was easy. Like it'd probably be fun. That's like one of the reasons why I look at this. I'm like, I don't think the zombies in this are that scary. Like the only thing you really have to worry about is like the alpha zombies, like potentially messing with your horse, ripping its head off, I guess, but you just, you know. So I really feel like horses would be a big game-changing aspect of this too, where it's now you can not just use them for warfare, of course, against the undead and potentially other human factions, but just logistics out the wazoo, like horse-drawn carriages, transferring information, all of that stuff that horses historically were useful for. Essentially everything is like trying to get back up to like as advanced as pre-electricity civilization was, right? And then of course you could even get into the electricity advancements of like telegraphs and stuff like that. I think that's absolutely not crazy at all. Where you would have, say, a telegraph line that's running to the fortress across the way, telegraph line running to the next fortress. And it's like you're just communicating with things and observing reports, and there's a whole system. There's a dispatch, there's a whole patrol system, I think, for just ensuring that much more security within your new civilization. Now, I really kind of want to pause here, where Spike and Jamie encounter the fast zombies in the alpha. The alpha already shows its intelligence. They get chased by the zombies and they hide. But what's ominous about this is that the alpha like sits there and watches and just observes and waits for them to move. And it shows like a higher level of intelligence with that whole rage virus. It's alarming to think of like how over long periods of times this virus would evolve. Getting back to a more general scale of this, one thing I was deliberating on would be the two pathways that we can go with our whole video. One being the hard way, zero outside help, which is what we see in the movie and what we'll most likely go with, and the easy way, which would be outside help, which what we kind of see in the movie in a weird way, but generally not what you would expect. Now, the reason I want to expand on this is I think that an absolute quarantine wouldn't necessarily be the case unless the navies really were on top of it. And I think there could be a humanitarian push to help out the people still trapped on the island. Like if I was a leader of some kind, say even on the island we're talking about, I would have tried to establish communication with the outside world as fast as possible. Whether it's like you bring a white flag and row up to a boat and you say, hey, I know you guys can't help us, but can we have supplies? We're not asking to leave. I know you can't do that. Like, we understand, but can you at least send us boatloads of supplies? If this happened, if you could get that outside help, then that would take the speed of advancement to just overdrive. You're gonna build back your civilization extremely fast. You go from having to use horse-drawn carriages to now having electricity and gas, and tractors and vehicles, having ammunition with rifles instead of having to use bows to take out the infected. Chances are you could rebuild that civilization very quick. If anything, what it shows in the movie is that because they don't do that, chances are they just want all of those people to just die. That's what they're banking on and hoping the virus finally, hopefully, eventually just all of it dies off. To me, that's kind of messed up. Like if I was on the island, I'd be like, hey man, like, can we get some outside help? I even had this dark thought where if I was a leader and I was like not getting the help I wanted, I would be floating around the idea of sending a virus on like a boat back to the mainland as a threat. Like, listen, you guys are gonna send me the stuff I want so I can rebuild civilization, or else put me in charge, dude. I'm the island's top guy. I mean, think of all the horrific implications of not having modern medicine on that island would be. You would have just an increase in whole birthing deaths and all that involves with people getting sick and not being able to treat them. And that's actually a big plot point in the movie where Jamie's wife has terminal cancer and Spike doesn't actually know what it is. Maybe Jamie has an idea thanks to some of the older people, but what's interesting about Jamie is that if he's in his 30s, he was just another kid when this all happened if it's 28 years later. Hell, dude, I'm 28. That'd be like my entire lifetime later. Oh my God. In 2030, I'm gonna be older. So getting back to the plot line of the movie, Jamie and Spike get back to the causeway to get to the island. Tide is just low enough for them to cross, but then that alpha zombie shows back up and starts chasing them down. And I will say, as far as the themes of suspension go in the movie, I think the movie has a hard time getting back to that level of suspense at this scene for the rest of the film. Alpha zombie that chases them gets killed, they get back in, and Spike has completed his coming of age ritual. Everyone's having a party. They're going hard, and this looks like a great time. You know, I mean, you probably don't get to do much fun things in this style of setting, but getting to get together with everyone and drink and dance and have a good time looks to be it, fellas. This would also help propel the plot too, because Jamie is having an affair with another woman in the village. Now, Spike sees his dad run off in their drunken state and engage in this affair. At his age, he realizes what's going on, and he goes to his mom, and he has a whole confrontation with his dad. But the problem is that his mom has been really out of her wits for a while thanks to the cancer, and there's really nothing they can do about it. The cancer pretty much just has to run its course. Spike doesn't really know this yet, so he has this argument with his dad. He then goes and burns down a supply shed, I think it was, which commits arson on the island against his own people. And then Spike takes his mom and they go off to try and find a doctor that his dad told him about. Now Spike and his mom start on their journey, but at the start of it, really not that eventful in the grand scheme of things. Like, there's some stuff that happens, but nothing too crazy just yet. We're starting to see the decline of Spike's mom as the cancer just keeps doing its thing. So then the movie introduces us to the Swedish marooned boat crew. Now this is an interesting detail because I think it's a toss-up between these guys either being high-speed boat crews or kind of just being regular patrol type dudes. From their armament, I think they're trying to convey them being more high speed, but their actions kind of show them as not being that high speed. What I mean by that is, with military boat crews, what the mission kind of is orientated to is, like, if a tactical team is on a boat like that, their whole job is to conduct essentially CQB of clearing maritime vessels on the water. And their whole kit and gear setup is going to be dialed in a certain way. If it's like a regular, kind of more rank and file Navy patrol, they may not be as up armored, and their more armament is expected to be like the boat they're on itself, like a patrol boat with bigger crew served style weapons. The kit and the proficiency and competence they portray of these guys is not that great. Like, Jamie and his kid were out taking a handful of these zombies on already and killing them, like, with just bows, and these guys show up with full auto rifles and sidearms, and they're getting overwhelmed by kind of like a similar number of infected. It's just kind of, are you guys that bad? Like, you got guns, dude. Oh, big zombie shows up, watch this. Zip that thing up from stem to stern, he's gonna die. The kit they have on, like the tactical gear itself, is really bad. They have two big ass white lights on their helmet. One would be enough, and then you would also have, like, realistically you would have a white light, probably even be smaller. That's not an uncommon thing amongst tactical units to have. And you would have another white light on your weapon. And the way they even employ those white lights when they need to, because they end up running into a cave, just three of them, or not a cave, but like an underground structure, they all turn their white lights on, they're like walking around. A big problem with having them out like that, if you need to look at your buddy, he's going to start beaming you with white light too, and you're now just blinding each other in a dark setting where you potentially needed to have some level of night vision. Like, even more advanced people, if they don't have night vision devices themselves, they could just close one eye to try and retain a level of, okay, if it gets dark, open your eye again, so then you could potentially see in the dark better. In that setting, it's very pitch dark, so I doubt that's what they would want to do, but you would have a white light on your gun at least, and then what you could do is just take that white light and turn it to where it's now bouncing off the roof of that ceiling, so you can have a better field of view instead of trying to see, like, directly in front of you. That way, if you all do that, it creates a nice umbrella of light, so where it's like, oh, hey, what's around us? Oh, a big ass zombie! And then you don't get ambushed as easy. The guns themselves, I will say, I found rather interesting because it looked like they weren't even set up to have suppressors. Like, I think the idea was to make them look modern, like they had like a Trijicon RMR, and then I believe was like an L119A2 style upper receiver. From what I was reading on IMFDB, it may have been an amalgamation of that with like a Colt Canada style. They had a collapsing stock on there. So my takeaway is that they were trying to make them look high speed, like they were like a maritime operation group for doing like boat seizures and raids and stuff like that. But the execution of them being high speed wasn't necessarily all there. Out of that group, one guy survives, and that would be Eric. And Eric runs into Spike and his mom when Spike and his mom were getting chased by some zombies, and he saves them in kind of like a cheesy way. So Eric saves Spike and his mom and kind of joins their group on the way to the Bone Temple to go see the doctor. Eric really, like, to me, has poor survival skills because he should be picking up this vibe of like reading the room and playing along, even if it does seem weird. Spike's mom is going through that late stage cancer where if she has tumors in her brain, it's messing with how she perceives stuff, and she's saying weird stuff like calling her son her dad at moments. And this, of course, is like Eric saying this is like, this is weird. Either reading the room like, oh, maybe she has a sickness or something. Oh, this kid's going to see a doctor. Maybe she has cancer because these people don't have access to modern technology. He may not pick up that right away, but at the very least, he should just shut up and be like, hey, this 12-year-old kid clearly comes from a village. Maybe that's my best chance of survival. So, yeah, I'll help you out, dude. Whatever you need kind of vibe. There's a really funny scene where Eric has an iPhone like on 1%, and he shows Spike his girlfriend, and like Spike's never even seen makeup, and he's like, what's up with her face? Really funny implications. Technology. Now, when Spike joins the group as they move along, we get to one of the more interesting aspects of the movie, and that would be the infected birth scene. We got a glimpse of her earlier with the infected, with the whole pack. The whole crew comes across her, and she went off onto her own to give birth because she was pregnant. A lot of questions here. Was she pregnant at the time of her infection? Was the baby a product of the infected breeding? Because what ends up happening, Spike's mom, Isla, in her kind of cancerous, foggy state, comes across the infected, and against everyone's better judgment, she helps this infected woman give birth. And it's kind of like a beautiful moment, it's like that feminine energy transcending this boundary, and then the baby comes out and it's uninfected. That in itself, a whole nother set of questions, because you would imagine like it comes out as an infected little baby, and then I guess they raise this infected, and that's how like the infected keep spreading on the island. So now, do you have to combat the infected childbirth rate? Like, that's insane to think about all the implications of this, but in a weird way, thankfully the baby comes out uninfected. And so now you have like this weird dilemma. If I was a dude in that situation, I'd be like looking at this like, oh my God. So the craziest interaction of this whole thing is that the infected mom, she's kind of like cooperative with Isla. She gives birth, baby comes out, cuts the umbilical cord, infected mom recovers and goes back to being a crazy deranged infected. How does this, like, that? There's so much to unpack with all this. Like does she like just eviscerate her own baby if she comes back to the state? Was she trying to protect her baby? And she saw, like, there's all these questions I have of how is this even feasible? And did like the alpha impregnate this girl? And like what's like the mating ritual of the infected if they are mating, or if this girl was infected before? That one was pretty crazy. That one I was like truly trying to wrap my head around because it's a whole life-giving process. And then of course the moral ramifications of this mom gives birth to a baby, mom comes back to being infected, is now a threat to everyone else for making you infected. Eric smokes the mom, but the baby's okay. And it's like, as a dude, it's like I'm looking at this baby like, I got kids, I'm not gonna harm a baby. But then of course Eric's like, it's a zombie baby. But then Eric gets his head ripped off by an alpha zombie in this whole scene, dropping his gun, which I think will probably come into play in the second movie because there's gonna be a second movie. Yet again, Eric showing his lack of survival skills, where clearly it's like, hey dude, the baby's not infected, how about you chill out, read the room, like we're all good to go. Like, you just killed the mom that was infected. There was a lot to unpack, and I thought that was a very, like, just wild turn in the movie that you would not expect from a zombie movie. Not the first time you see like a zombie baby in film, but when it comes out uninfected like that, it's like, dude, how do you, like, the moral implications of this, right? I think the baby was Samson's based off how focused he was on that group after potentially one of his harem of infected women getting killed off. Yet again, it's just really raising the question of like how the infected go so crazy trying to infect others. Would they gently infect a baby, trying not to hurt it? Would the whole virus kind of know like how it's evolved to infect a baby, and then it grows up to be like an infected? Maybe the baby even grows up to be like another alpha. So much of an abstract to try and play with that. Because then like you have these deranged entities of humans trying to look after like an infant, and it's just like really hard to wrap your head around. Like, okay, yeah, they can breed, but maybe like the virus making them breed in an attempt to eventually get like a viable human, like make them figure it out. Like a lot of questions to unpack for a zombie movie. Eric's dead, his head ripped from his body, and Isla and Spike are running away where the doctor saves them from Samson the Alpha. That's what the doctor calls him. And then we get to a scene where Isla is diagnosed by the doctor in the Temple of the Skulls, the Skull Temples, the Bone Temple, because the doctor has been spending years making this massive shrine to death as a remembrance. People thought he was crazy, but he's not. He diagnoses Isla to have terminal cancer, and kind of a really interesting theme here too with like euthanasia. Be seeing Isla essentially consenting to be gently killed by the doctor because she's in so much pain. A lot to unpack there too, but it's above my pay grade. Another theme where I think it's more in my scope would be Spike having to come to the realization of how close to death he'll always be on that island. As someone myself that's lost a parent, it is a harsh confrontation to your own mortality. Watching someone that raised you, that you thought would be invincible, end up dying is a very surreal experience, and it's something that we all have to experience. We all have to die. We all have to see people we know and love die, and that's part of our reality. And that's very much so amplified in Spike's reality. His coming of age ritual didn't just stop with that hunting trip with his dad. It was even amplified by having to watch his mom die. Now, to speed run through the rest of the plot, Spike would take the baby back to the settlement, but he still wants to be out on his own for a bit, where he would eventually run into Jimmy, who we saw at the beginning of the movie. And I believe this whole scene, which was kind of weird and abstract at the time, I think makes a lot of sense because they fight like the Power Rangers and they dress like Teletubbies, because when they were kids, this is when the infection started and they lost all their parents. So that was their only real role models growing up. This makes a lot more sense when you put it in that context, but it was still very weird to watch in the theaters, and I think it was just another setup for the second installment of this series. Ultimately, I think the movie itself was a breath of fresh air in the massive tidal waves of just trash that we've been getting. I don't think it's one of the best movies ever, but I think it was one of the most enjoyable movies I've seen in a bit. It's kind of a sad thing to say with like a movie like 28 years later. It's not necessarily like crazy awesome, but it's a lot more awesome than what we have been seeing because we're so used to just absolute trash. Now, with the plot out of the way, really the whole point of this video is rebuilding civilization 28 years later. I don't think it's that crazy, and if we're really on still the first setting of no outside help, it's just going to be a lot slower of a process. The goal should really be to pacify as much of the territory that you can reasonably control at a time while sustaining your civilization. Ideally, you could also get to a point where you could incorporate some kind of ship making, but this could have its own ramifications if there is a massive naval blockade around your island. Now, I think the goal of the ship making wouldn't necessarily be about to try and escape that quarantine line, but more so to give you more speed of travel around the island itself of the UK. I would say it could be risky if maybe they see you building a boat and they just come over and just absolutely destroy your boat with machine gun fire or something. It would be pretty jacked up. At that point, I would definitely send a smaller boat or a boat of some kind with a bunch of infected on it as an FU for messing with my boats. You've declared war on my civilization. I will use biological warfare instantaneously. Looking back at the defense in depth idea, I don't think it's actually a bad idea. I'm sure you guys in the comments will have your own thoughts on how to go about it. I think that will allow you to create more space and build up defenses and have defense in depth in case there is ever an outbreak within your civilization. For instance, on the island, you have your defensive gate. Boom, you build a foothold of a fortress like this right here, another poor drawing. This is supposed to be the moat in theory, but say for another example, you could start building houses on this and there's an outside defensive structure. If there's ever a breach or you need a way to cut off a breach inside of here, because by that point of houses being their own fortress, people can hunker down until maybe troops come back and cleanse the settlement of all the infected. But the idea is like to incrementally build out and expand, and it would probably take generations and generations to build up a point to where you can easily go around and start dominating. I don't think it would take too long. Like I really think you would maybe need, for clearing out large chunks of your area, probably easily a few hundred guys. I think making all the resources, getting all the horses, getting everything else in line would probably take a little bit longer. Yet again, I think the goalpost is trying to be as advanced as possible without electricity, like trying to get as close back to the modern world as we know it. Potentially it could happen, and you're just one of those weird civilizations that is kind of stuck in this weird time limbo where the people that were there for the fall of your civilization all kind of held that knowledge of how civilization could work. And that's anything a funny play on a lot of the popular zeitgeist right now, like really taking a big old lunge into a different rabbit hole, like the whole Younger Dryas impact, advanced ancient civilization things like Graham Hancock and Jimmy Corsetti all talk about, where at the fall of those potentially advanced ancient civilizations that predate the history that we talk about, they all had this knowledge, but they end up getting wiped out, and humanity has to kind of restart in a lot of ways. Kind of like what's happening here in this instance. It's our Younger Dryas for this scenario is a rage virus. Gentlemen, I will say I did enjoy this movie very much, and I'm excited for the next one to come out. I believe it's going to be in 2026. Yet again, a big trope and a big thing that I don't like about movies like this is how slow society is to rebuild, and how, given the threat, it's actually not that crazy to go out and conquer and get it all done. I feel like the threat you are faced with is not that bad, so rebuilding civilization is not that big of a deal. If anything, I just want to sail around on a ship and shoot my arrows at zombies. That sounds like the life. And then come back, drink some ale with the lads, and do a little dancing with the winches. That's all I got for you. Catch you on the flip. I worry that the baby may have been the doctor's because he's got a little morphine blow dart set up. Man's been out there a long time, dude. The naked infected lady's running around. He probably did 2 and 2. He's like, hey, I got a date rape gun here. I'm lonely. I got some questions for that doctor, dude. Hey, you're under arrest. The doctor was like, yeah, you better get that baby back to its people. He was real quick to be like, oh, dude, that's crazy. You know you're down bad when you're sipping for some infected ussy, for that zombussy.